Hello, this is lecture 3 of lesson 21. So we pick up the story again with the consulship of Marcus Tullius Cicero in the year 63. We will be still using your Cicero book and your Cicero worksheet number 2. Again, where we left off, Cicero is now facing the conspiracy, the actual conspiracy of his political enemy Catiline. And we just heard him give a speech in the Senate on November 7th, the night after this supposed plot by Catiline, in which he said, "How much longer, Catiline, are you going to exploit our patience?" Meaning like Catiline is creating a revolution. He is standing against everything that we, the Roman Senate, are standing for. So that was Cicero's perspective. And we are lucky enough to have actually one other perspective written by the Roman historian Sallust a few years later. And so this is what he has to say. This is also, by the way, included in your book on page 66. So this is what he said. Then the consul Marcus Tullius, that is Cicero, made a speech. When he sat down, Catiline, ready to be wholly deceitful, with his head downcast, began to demand with the words of a suppliant that the fathers, that is the senators, should not believe anything about him without good reason. Such was the family from which he came. They should not think that he, a patrician, whose own and whose ancestors' services to the Roman plebs were very many, needed to the ruin of the republic, while Marcus Tullius, an immigrant in the city of Rome, was saving it. When to this he began to add other insults, they all protested loudly, calling him an enemy of the state and a murderer. At this point, beside himself with rage, he replied, "Since I am surrounded by enemies and driven over the top, I shall put out the fire which threatens me by wholesale demolition." Then he rushed out of the Senate House. So this is what the other perspective gives us, Sallust's description. Of course, the perspective we really want to have is Catiline's, and actually some historians went that far as to suspect whether Catiline actually organized quite the revolution that Cicero was depicting in his speech. However, there is something interesting in this speech that Sallust depicts, which is the representation of a distinction by which Catiline was trying to appeal to fellow Roman senators. He says that I, Catiline, come from a patrician family who has been long time helping Romans. And on the other hand, he says that Marcus Tullius Cicero was, as your book translates, an immigrant in the city of Rome. So what this, of course, has to do with is maybe slightly less the fact that Cicero was from Arpinum, which is the town we looked at in Italy, that is not Rome, but it's really implying this issue that Cicero was a new man. And therefore the idea is that he would be much less likely to save the traditional constitution of Rome than Catiline. So we can think a little bit here about how what the Romans do usually is that they appeal back to the tradition. And the question is, who can make that appeal better? Is that Cicero, who is a new man, but actually in many ways he is very strongly believing in values of the Republic, or is it Catiline, who, on the other hand, has family members who have been serving in leading offices and who has probably lots and lots of family connections. So this is an interesting problem, but we see that in the moment when Cicero has given the speech, and clearly some people were aware of the actual revolt outside of the city, the situation in the Senate was in favor of Cicero in contrast to Catiline. And I think it's fair to say that Cicero is very well connected at this point, and he has some connections that he can actually use to get support for his actions. But this leaves Catiline really without too many options. The real only option he has is to go ahead and organize some kind of revolt against Rome, of course, not unprecedented, excellent tradition of Sulla, marching on Rome a number of times, and others. But still, this is not going to lead to a peaceful resolution. Another little bit that may be worth observing in the speech that we have been observing in other speeches is the depiction of Catiline, or sorry, in Sallust's text, which is, let's find that little bit when he talks about the fact that that Catiline is very much in a motion of rage, right? He's very, very angry. And we have seen already that usually means in Rome something bad, somebody who is out of control, who cannot restrain themselves, which is usually seen as a personal shortcoming, as somebody who loses it is not considered a good leader, a good example for others. So that's the other depiction that we get. The actual historical outcome is clear. Catiline is abandoned by his fellow senators and he is out of options. And so he rushes out of the Senate. We are lucky enough to have a letter that also survived in the text of Sallust, and this is on page 67 in your reader, in which Catiline writes to fellow Roman senators, in fact, the leading figure of the Optimates, Quintus Catullus, who has nothing to do with that famous poet that you might have heard of, Catullus with the two L's. But at any rate, he writes this letter to him. And this is what he has to say. And I think it gives us really a sense of how he might have still tried to make the argument about his own case and why he might be a better leader than Cicero and what his position was. So this is what he says. Your outstanding loyalty, which I know from experience and which I have appreciated in my great danger, has given confidence to this appeal of mine, right? So this is how you appeal to someone, not to self. Upon my word, you may know it to be true that I was provoked by wrongs and insults because I was deprived of the rewards of my hard work and effort, and I did not get a position of dignitas. Notice that Latin word dignitas, which is our word dignity, of course, and what he's talking about is actually the office of consulship. I undertook, as was my custom, the cause of the poor as a whole, not because I was unable to pay debts in my name from my own estate, but because I saw unworthy men honored with public office and felt that I had been wrongly suspected and treated as an enemy of the state. It is on these grounds that I have pursued hopes, honorable enough in view of my situation, of preserving what remains of my dignitas. Farewell. So this gives us a little bit of a sense of how Catiline might have viewed his own situation, that he was really out of options, and that he is really trying to tell this Optimate leader here is that he had to do this, he had to appeal to the people because the traditional pathways didn't work for him. And that's a very interesting thought experiment for us to try to imagine what would have happened if the Gracchi brothers, who we know, Tiberius Gracchus, for example, and the other populares later on, if they partially undertook these measures, maybe due to philosophical ideals about how helping the people is a good thing, but maybe sometimes because the traditional pathways didn't work for them. So they were sort of populist leader or applying to the Populus Romanus because they couldn't get to power in any other way. So what happens in Rome in the meantime is that Catiline rushes off and he joins the soldiers outside of the city. However, a few days later, in early December, they capture some of his associates. And so now they have a situation, and the situation is that they have some conspirators against the state after a declaration of the ultimate decree of the Senate. So we are in a state of emergency, and they have to decide what to do with these captured people who are clearly complicit in the potential revolt against Rome's traditional leadership. And so Cicero has this to say in the senatorial debate on December 5th, after they have these captured in the individuals. And this is on page 68, 69 in the reader. And so Cicero says, I see that there are so far two proposals. run from Decimus Silanus, recommends that those who have tried to destroy the state should be punished with death, right? So that's one argument. Capture people, they were trying to destroy us, so let us destroy them, they should be punished by death. The other proposal from Julius Caesar sets aside the death penalty, but includes the most severe of other available punishments. So this is super interesting, and for the first time we encounter the name of Julius Caesar here taking a very powerful position in a senatorial debate in the year 63. And his argument is that these captured individuals should not be put to death. Now, Cicero very clearly comes down on one side. Let's see what he says. The one does not think that those who have tried to deprive all of us and the Roman people of life, who have tried to destroy the empire and to blot out the name of the Roman people, ought for a single moment to enjoy life and the air we all breathe. He recalls that this form of punishment has often been employed in the Republic against wicked citizens. So he makes the argument to get rid of them, to kill them. These are conspirators. We don't need to try to save them. Now, debates go one way or another the day when the debate happens, and then they can have long-term consequences. The way this debate goes is that Julius Caesar actually loses this debate and Cicero succeeds. And so what happens to Catiline, and here's a slide with his later career, is that he takes over after that famous incident in the Senate. He takes over the leadership of the rebellion, and in the middle of November, he is declared enemy of the state. And then in a battle in the year 62, he was defeated with the remainder of his army and was killed. What happens to his fellow conspirators who were captured in Rome is that under the very heavy influence of Cicero, they are executed without trial. And this is the issue that's going to be on our mind for a long time to come, because killing citizens without trial is, of course, not appropriate unless, of course, we declare a state of emergency. But who decides? And in what state of emergency should we make an allowance for individuals to lose such basic citizen rights as a right to a trial by a jury? So, in fact, what we will see in Cicero's later career, that at first things look beautiful. He receives a title in the year 63 after this all unfolds, Father of the Fatherland, which is an honorary title representing what a protecting figure he has been. And he is actually very powerfully taking on then this leadership role in association with a number of fellow senators, that this was the right decision and the Roman state has to be protected. And we see him sort of pop up against various popularis figures such as Clodius, the later tribune in the year 62-61. And what we see, however, is that in 58-57, he will have to go to exile after Clodius, who is the popularis tribune, who is very famous because he had a famous scandal in the earlier years, 62-61. Anyways, this tribune, Clodius, is bringing charges against him for executing these individuals who were fellow conspirators of Catiline. So this will not, in the long run, this will become a very, very big political heritage for Cicero to carry. So at first looks really good, later on doesn't look so good, and he's sort of going to be weighing on his career for the rest of his life. How things unfold after year 63 is, however, something we are going to talk about in the next lesson. This is the end of lesson 21. This was lecture 3, and now you can go ahead and answer the questions that are also available on Top Hat. Thank you.